spring, as Zach and I first began to meet and interact with members of the Board of Visitors, many of them lamented to us that they had not had the opportunity to really interact with your average William and Mary student. Conversely, when we talked to students about the Board of Visitors, many of them had no idea who they are, what their function is, where they come from, how they're chosen, and really nothing about them.
This is obviously a huge problem because the Board of Visitors is the college's supreme governing body, and the students are, I guess you could say, the supremely governed bodies at the college. And for those two to have never interacted, I mean, that's just unhealthy for any organization. So we came up with an idea. We just called it simply BOV-Student Lunch Program, where students were able to sign up on the SA website and enter into a random drawing to be one of 40 students to eat lunch with a member of the Board of Visitors during their first meeting, their first lunch of their 2-day meetings. It was incredibly successful. Way more people applied to get into this lunch than we could actually fit, and the board members had an absolutely fantastic time. What was a little bit good but also disheartening about the whole process was that these board members were coming up to me and Valerie afterwards and saying, "Oh, it was so great, this was the first time that we'd ever actually gotten to sit down with," one woman said, "students that hadn't been pre-screened by the administration." And that's great to be able to provide them with that experience and students that experience, but it's also really scary that people on the Board of Visitors had never met students who weren't winners of some huge academic awards or star athletes or members of student government. And really that sparked a bigger interest in us into trying to figure out more and more ways to open up this Board of Visitors to the student body and to the community for the benefit of all of us.
Now more than ever, it's really, really important to increase student BOV interaction. And one thing that we did as soon as we were in office was reform the student presentation that's given to the BOV every time that they meet. Generally, what's happened in the past is that the two BOV liaisons will get up and give a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation, about things going on campus, events that have happened, etc. But we've worked with our BOV liaisons, Tina Ho and Joelle Cristo-Dante, to totally reform this process. Basically what they've done is invite student organizations who are doing things on campus currently, like while the BOV meetings is going on, or student organizations who have done something very productive for the community, to come and present themselves and interact with members of the BOV. And we found that this is wonderful, both for members of the BOV and for the students, because students are able to talk about issues of student concern to the people who directly impact the policy, and Board of Visitors members have a chance to learn about something that's not in their gigantic manual that they have prepared for them every time they come to a meeting. It's also led to fruitful discussions after the meeting. Several BOV members have begun working with individual students to implement very important programs and programs that will hopefully shape our campus in the future.
But of course, no discussion on the BOV can be complete without talking about President Nichols' recent resignation as president of the college. When we found out that in an email, just like everyone else, that President Nichols had resigned, we were completely shocked. I think everyone, yeah, no matter what your position on it was just floored. We immediately leapt into action, though. That day, we had our Secretary of Public Affairs send an email to Michael Powell, contacting him and telling him that he needed to get either himself or other members of the Board of Visitors down to campus as soon as possible to explain what was going on, because there were so many questions going around. The next day, after President Nichols' resignation, we created a form online where students could submit their questions to the BOV on anything they wanted, just whether or not it was on this their reasoning for firing Jim Nickel, or whether or not legislators had any influence. Nobody knew at this point, and so we received hundreds and hundreds of questions sent onto this website. At the same time, we were in constant phone contact with members of the board, like Secretary Suzanne Matthews, and essentially what we did over the course of the next 10 days is we were always in touch with members of the board, people in the president's office, and we started designing this student forum in the best way we possibly could that would allow for the maximum amount of student input, and that would allow to give us the maximum amount of information from the Board of Visitors. So we consolidated all these hundreds of questions down to essentially 8 that we felt were most basic to understanding, were most frequently submitted, and really were the most pointed and unavoidable to give an answer to. We worked with Dr. Dukes from the University of Virginia, who agreed to moderate the student forum, who, if anyone went to the forum watching this, I think he was pretty good about making sure that they answered the questions and then allowing for ample student voices. And then after the forum, we made sure that members of the board broke up into smaller groups so that anyone who wasn't able to get their question answered was able to get into a small working group with 1 or 2 members of the board and make sure that their question got answered. We've put the video is online on YouTube right now. You can see the link in the comments or in the description of this video if you look at it. And yeah, one thing that we've been thinking about talking with students after that student forum, for many of them, unlike Valerie and I, it was the first time they'd seen members of the board's face, that they'd heard their names, that they'd heard them speak, and that's a problem. So one of the things that we're hoping to do, starting with this April meeting, is to establish a recurring program where after every Board of Visitors meeting, 4 times a year, one member of the board stays behind and just gives some sort of talk or speech or forum on any topic of their choice, on their profession, on their own biography, on current events, whatever they want to talk about. It would be held in UC Commonwealth. All members of the college community would be invited, and afterwards there would be a completely open question and answer session where you could ask the board member questions about what they were just talking about, or you could ask them really about anything, their opinions on everything from the weather to the US presidential race. We think this will be a pretty successful program. It'll be a lot better than the board just coming in for 2 days and then slipping out without anyone really noticing or paying attention. It'll hopefully continue to add to that increased interactions between students and members of the Board of Visitors.